This is a good question, and one that I feel is more common than not, but let me go ahead and explain this. Okay. I'm going to paraphrase real quick about re-eligibility for your son with autism spectrum disorder. He's headed into first grade, and you feel that the school system predetermined your son's eligibility based solely on his academics. Now, I don't know when they got your consent, because they can't do a reevaluation without your consent. During that reevaluation process, where they discuss what evaluations or assessment they're going to use, along with which boxes or areas they're going to be evaluating in, the parent has input. And also the parent has input in the meeting, and I'm just laying that out there. I'm not saying that you did or didn't do any of this stuff. I'm just laying it out there so parents understand the reevaluation process. So they can't bully you. They can't only look at a singular area of eligibility or continued eligibility, because just because a child, let's say, qualifies for a speech language impairment, doesn't mean that they might not have a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or any other area specific learning disability, to where having just a mere singular look at whether the child continues to qualify as a speech language impairment, absolutely inappropriate. It is against the special education rules. They are supposed to thoroughly evaluate the child to ensure that and they're supposed to test for all known and unknown disabilities. So it isn't a one-shot kind of situation to where, they're only looking at one particular area. And so if a child makes gains on their academic goals, you're exactly right. It doesn't nullify or negate the fact that your child has educational performance deficits in communication or social emotional development, which are also two critical areas of educational performance for which we have an IEP, for which we design goals, and where a child requires what we call specialized instruction. And so that is a two-prong requirement in order to even qualify or even remain eligible for an IEP. Having a disability by itself doesn't matter. Okay, that's what 504s are for. But even there are cases to where even a child with a disability doesn't necessarily qualify for a 504. The disability has to have a substantial impact on a child's major life functions. Okay, so take the extra step. The child, in order to qualify for an IEP, must have a qualifying disability. There's 13 recognized areas in most of our states across the country. So in those 13 categories, a qualifying disability, that's number one. And then the second threshold is that they must be in need of specialized instruction, which obviously specialized instruction would include related services and supports and all those other things, which are all encased in an IEP. Okay? Now, what I frequently see is as a problem with schools is that they will, what I call half-ass it. I'm going to use my Italian here. And they'll sit there and pigeonhole a child. And I'm not going to say that this is even coming down from administration, because I don't think a lot of the administration is that stupid. Now, I know which school system you are in, and unfortunately, that administration, some of this stuff is intentional. Because I've had too many cases to where I've busted them doing this stuff, and you would sit there and think after so many cases that you would learn not to do that. Well, they haven't changed, which tells me this is purposeful in order to keep their special education enrollment numbers down. And so some of this stuff's very intentional to where if they get busted, they'll fix it. But how many parents give up, think that they're being told the truth, move to a different district, instead of standing their ground. And I know that you're moving to a different district. I don't know. And I saw, I've been busy. So I just saw that you had a meeting. I don't know when it was, a week ago, something like that. Now, provide a follow-up. Let me know how that meeting went in the new district to see what's going on. But in your old district, yes, it's not just about looking at some of those assessments like, iNow or Ames Web or anything like that that are just like general probes in reading and math that are used with all students. Well, your child's not all students. Your child has an IEP. Your child requires evaluations and assessments that require your consent. Why is that? Because those aren't given to all the students, because your student's not one of all the students. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't give those probes. I think that they have some value, but if they're relying on that along with, let's say, anecdotal records, how your child performed on just grading, which in my viewpoint is arbitrary, and that becomes sort of the standard or what's solidifying their opinion that your child no longer requires specialized instruction, which is special education, then yes, they're absolutely wrong. And yes, they should consider all the other areas. And there are some school districts that they're just sort of like, I don't see behavior and social emotional. I only see academics. And we'll sprinkle in some speech language. But they tend to focus on that in the preschool years. We tend to see a lot of speech language impairment qualifications, and then that ends up sort of going away once a child hits kindergarten and above, okay? And, so yes, I see these problems. I see what you're going through all the time. It's just that you are correct in your suspicion that it wasn't done the right way. But as I also said, make sure before you sign consent that you have had them thoroughly explain all the different eligibility categories they're going to be considering. Also take into consideration, are you medicating your child? Because if you are, then it very well could have an impact, an artificial impact, especially on adaptive behavior rating skills. Because you're sending your child to school medicated, that isn't the natural child. Your natural child is the one that requires a specialized instruction and the supports and accommodations. It's not the medicated child. The medicated child doesn't need anything. It is the natural child. But, a lot of parents are like, well, but if my child acts a certain way, that's right. That's why your child has an IEP. But if parents, and I'm not a medical doctor, guys, if parents can medicate their child all they want. I'm just telling you the impact that I see this stuff having when it comes to 3-year reevaluations, when it comes to eligibility considerations, because there are some eligibility categories that absolutely require teachers to fill out behavior and adaptive behavior rating skills. And they can only do it based upon what they see in the child they experience on a daily basis. And so if you're sending your child medicated to school and there are no behavioral or adaptive behavioral responses that would raise the concern of the teacher, they just don't see it because the child's medicated. I have a lot of parents who are going, but if my child wasn't medicated, they would be off the wall and everybody. That's the natural child, okay? But don't fault the school personnel if they don't see that child. They can only fill out those rating skills based upon the child you provide them, okay? I'm not saying not to medicate. I am just telling you how these things impact reevaluations and eligibility considerations. Okay, this is something you should talk to your physician about. I am just putting the information out there as to what I see in these cases. And so all of these things play a factor, but the devil's in the details. You need to sit there before you provide consent, say, what is it that you guys are evaluating for? Make sure that we are covering all potential areas so that, we have the best shot of my child requalifying or continuing to qualify as requiring specialized instruction or special education services that include social emotional development communication, not just academics.